Started. Welcome, folks, to our first official Baby Devs Special Interest Group meeting for the koha-US Baby Devs Special Interest Group, or SIG. We did have kind of a unofficial meeting after koha-US where we first talked about having this special interest group. During the special interest group speed dating event, when we were talking with the I think it was with the web dev group. I was asked about like what stops bugs from getting pushed. Like if it's been signed off or if it hasn't been tested yet, but there's a bug waiting to be signed off, like what are the things that stop it from moving forward? And sometimes there's like a few different steps. It's got to pass QA, and we have a fairly small QA team. I think we have like 2 new people on it this next cycle. Me and there's Brendan. Yeah. Me and Brendan are joining, and I think everybody else is continuing. But to be on the QA team, you have to at least understand the code to an extent and have a koha testing Docker so you can run the QA tools. And so it's not like anybody can do it, but it does take a certain level of knowledge. And then kind of the next place that there's a bottleneck sometimes is the things that can't be tested on the sandboxes, because that really cuts down who can test the bugs. And then also for like accountability in the community, like Bywater folks can't sign off on Bywater written patches. PTFS folks can't sign, PTFS Europe folks can't sign off on PTFS Europe written patches. And so that also narrows who can sign off on bugs in general, but especially those bugs that require a koha testing Docker setup, or require more information, because you can't just do it in the sandbox. And so we said, well, let's start with that, start with getting people set up with koha testing Dockers and like learning how to sign off on patches that are a little more complicated. And then we can start getting into like easy patches to do, like string changes, which is where you just, we're renaming this, or there's a typo, or it doesn't match with the language that we've chosen to use as the standard for koha, things like that. And then eventually be able to do more. So how many people who are here have set up a test in Docker in the past? I know Brendan and I have. Brendan's got a couple patches.
I helped Annisha get hers set up, so she's up and running now.
Awesome.
I just wanted to also add, I guess, to what Lisette was saying. One thing that can kind of maybe slow things down is like if the testing plan is maybe sometimes some of the developers, they like kind of assume some knowledge and background in when they write the testing plan, and if you don't have that background information, that experience, basically, it's really hard to follow their test plan sometimes. So like improving or just like getting familiar with some of those things that some of the developers are like taking as it's assumed that anybody testing knows this or that. But generally speaking, like if you have a question about a test plan or something, comment on the bug, or just like maybe comment in Mattermost. And every time I've done that, people are really helpful in helping you to be able to follow their test plan.
And if someone doesn't have a test plan,
you can fail them immediately,
yeah,
right?
you could just fail QA and say like, this needs a test plan. They've gotten overall developers have gotten a lot better than when I started it with koha-US in 2016. There were a lot more bugs that didn't have test plans at all. And so they've come a long way in the last 8 years in making sure that bugs have test plans much more frequently. And yeah, people are always happy to answer questions. The Mattermost has been really great for asking for help on test plans. Especially if you're like, I feel like there's a step missing. That's what I'll do sometimes. I'll be like, I'm looking at this test plan, but I don't know how to get from like step 3 to 4 because it just says do this thing. And like maybe there's not good documentation because it's a new feature, or maybe I just don't know where to find the documentation because it's a weird thing that's not easy to find. But luckily Koha has a great community that is more than happy to help each other. So, okay, so we've got a couple people with dev boxes set up, but let's see. Oh, that's not the right tab. So the Koha testing Docker is on GitLab. I'm pulling up the link now. If you're on Windows, there might be a couple of extra steps. I'm not sure if they're all documented in the README on here. Brendan, you might know because you have Windows, right?
Yeah, I use Windows with Windows subsystem for Linux, and I'm not sure if that's it, like explicitly documented on the README. But it is I found on Windows it's pretty much the easiest way, I think, to set it all up. This I did follow all these instructions, but I made a little documentation for myself that lists some more extra stuff and like how to do it specifically on Windows if you're using Windows. I can link that. I can share a link. And my documentation is mostly like it links back to the official Koha testing Docker because that's like the source of all the most current information. But I kind of created this more or less like for my own learning purposes, and also it helped me go back and set it up the next time. I'll share from. So I have from like starting from installing dependencies. I'm using VS Code, which I think has a nice integration with it. From the basic, it's VS Code, Windows Subsystem for Linux, and the Docker desktop, and they all kind of work. There's a little bit of configuration that you need to do and to make them all work together. But once you get it set up, it's pretty smooth, I think.
This is great.
And I kind of stopped at some point. I need to get back into adding more because this is going to be like my little repository of knowledge that I'm acquiring myself, like kind of try to push myself to document some stuff.
Yeah, this is awesome. Lots of great links. I'm just looking through it. I'm like,
I want to put more stuff, like every time the thing I love about testing bugs is like following the test plans. You learn a lot of little things, and then you can apply that knowledge like when you want to try to do something similar. So like running all the cron jobs and stuff like that. I think it's really neat to be able to go from looking at the Koha manual and looking at what are the flags in there, but then you can also use the help flag on the cron job and see right there in your terminal. There's that, and there's a few different things that I learned at the KohaCon in Montreal from Nick did a workshop one thing that's really neat is when you first launch the Koha testing Docker, it has like default data in there, but some of the things like, let's say the password, the default password security is like hard. So for testing purposes, you might want to have like some simpler passwords, and you might want to have like certain users pre-set up or certain system configurations pre-set up. So there's actually now it's somewhere documented on the Koha testing Docker. It might not be in the README though, but it's in a commit message somewhere or an issue maybe, where if you create a folder called shared and you put in an SQL file there, it will run that SQL statement at the beginning when you launch Koha testing Docker. So like you can set system preferences and like create a user with a certain password and all that sort of thing. I'll try to find where that is written about. Try to link. So there's that, and the other thing that I learned at the KohaCon was Nick shared a repository. It's on Nick's GitHub, but it's just like a repository called Handy Scripts or something like that. And it's just a bunch of scripts that can like generate holds, generate random test data that you can use. So I've been playing around with that. It's pretty neat.
This is awesome. So what we can do is get started setting up. Some people might have to restart computers, which might mean we need to pause in setup, or unless people want to leave and come back. Either way is fine. Is everyone on Windows who hasn't set up a box? Or is anyone on Mac or Linux?
I am on Windows and I haven't set up a box, but I am going to have to jump to another meeting in about 5 to 10 minutes. So this is all stuff I will look at
Okay.
in the future.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Oh, good. I'm having Zoom problems today, and it's about to crash again. But I'm on Windows and I have not set up a box, so I'm kind of in the same boat.
Okay. So let's go through on Brendan's installing dependencies, which is really, well, I guess, does everyone have a Bugzilla account? Is really the first step.
Yes.
Yes.
And I know that I've seen everyone else comment on things. Okay. Then, yeah, really the next thing, installing dependencies. So we'll need to, yeah, that's really those. Docker desktop, which I can put links in the chat. And Brendan also linked to the Windows subsystem for Linux guide.
And for that one, if you're starting it now, it's probably going to be Windows subsystem for Linux 2, but that's going to be the one that you want in case there's an option for you.
Could you tell me briefly what VS Code is doing? Like, what are you using it for?
Oh, sure. I use it to edit the code and like browse the code. But also it just kind of when I use it it has an integrated terminal that I like. That the terminal's like right there in the code editor.
So
It
it doesn't have
it's
some other
probably optional. You
dependency.
don't need
Yeah.
it, but it does work really well, I found. You can use it just like you could just use the terminal, and when you start, you could use the Windows subsystem for Linux terminal, and then when you start up Koha testing Docker, you can use like Vim to do all your editing, but that's like a little bit, for me, it's a little bit much to use Vim.
Honestly, I started using VS Code just to write reports for Koha because it gives a nicer interface. But the native Koha interface has gotten better, but it's handy.
I use VS Code when I'm writing patches. If I'm just signing off, I don't usually worry about it.
Yeah.
Unless I have like if something needs to be rebased, sometimes I'll just do that and upload it as a QA patch if it's not like super complicated. I mean, even if it's super complicated, you could get to a point where you do that, but usually I just do it if it's not like a huge thing, since there's a lot of things I'm still working on learning. So
Yeah, I like the way that VS Code shows you like if there's a conflict. It does help a lot, I think, for rebasing. For me, at least.
You know, I haven't tried rebasing in VS Code because Nick showed me how to do it on the command line, but that would be a good thing to try sometime. So yeah, it's not necessary. I find it's a lot easier to search if you're looking for like we were testing changing the data tables to version 2 and like making sure we found all the data tables to test because of the way that the code works to find them. Much easier in VS Code than like get grepping for it. Just because it was like easy to find. Okay, here's the pages.
And it works if you use the terminal that's integrated with VS Code. If you do like git grep and it shows you the list of all those files are, if you control click on them, I think it opens that file in VS Code. So it's like integrated with it's nice to have both like the text editor that's there and also like the terminal at the same place.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I just wasn't sure if it was some other compiler. I don't think there would be, but it was just curious.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely it's not a real requirement. It's just a nice integration.
There is also a Perl plugin for it. So it'll do at least a little bit of like telling you where there's things wrong. That you can install, and I can find the link to that and share it. It might have to be on the mailing list because I don't know if I actually have it saved particularly anywhere. Oh, it's probably I can probably find it from my VS Code. So, Perl Navigator, provides syntax checking and all sorts of things. I think there's a little bit of, yeah, like autocomplete, things like that. So that can be really helpful. Oh yeah, and I think if you're using, no, maybe not, never mind. I was looking at that. Where's my code?
Yeah, this might be something I shouldn't admit publicly, but I just use Notepad++ for most things.
And see,
I
on
use-
the Mac, they didn't give me any like halfway decent Notepad to start with, so had to go out and forage.
On my home PC, I have like a local server set up for stuff, and I use Notepad a lot of the times there when I'm making changes to things. Just because I haven't got around to installing VS Code or similar. Oh, one thing that's nice about VS Code, and this might be because I have the extensions installed, but it'll show you like these are Perl files. This is a make file. These are swap files, that means those have been edited but not pushed. That's probably because I was rebasing a reserves thing. And you can see different, like, these are all the things that have been edited. And even see back like all the bugs, which is a nice visual thing instead of doing like a git log, which pushes a lot of information out if you're like, I just want to see what the most recent thing was. So that's helpful, and just being able to see like what has been changed is nice and easy.
Yeah, I also like when you're if you're like trying to write a patch and you have like little edits all in different areas of the code, and the file is like 1,000 lines long, there's like this neat little scroll bar on the right side that has like a miniature image of your code, and it highlights like what code you've edited, what lines you deleted maybe.
Yeah, so this is like, here it's green over here, and it was added, and here it's red because something was deleted. And you can scroll really easily. I don't know how visible that is on my screen because of my dark mode.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and you have like on the very right side, like those little rectangles show you like where to scroll that part of the code into view, which is pretty cool.
yeah, that's really nice.
Which program is this again?
This is VS Code,
VS Code. Okay. That's
which was linked in the. Is my screen share still going?
Yep, you're still
Yep.
sharing. And there's a free version of that and a paid version, right?
Is there a paid
Just
version?
free.
I thought it used to, okay, I thought it used to be, maybe I'm thinking of Visual Studio. Or no, it is Visual Studio.
It is Visual Studio. I think they open sourced
Oh,
it.
Okay.
yeah, there's some confusion, I think, with what is it? There's one that was like an IDE specifically for developing Microsoft stuff, and this one's just like a text editor.
And like the source is on GitHub, with an MIT license. So open source version, at least. So
Yeah, that definitely makes me more interested in using it.
yeah. Okay, I might have to force quit Zoom and come back because it's frozen a bunch of things. And hopefully not kick everybody out. I guess, is Kristi still here? I can't tell because my Zoom is frozen. Ah,
I think Kristi left. Yeah, I had to restart my computer to get Zoom to behave.
oh, the other me's not totally gone yet. That's fun. Now I'm trying to find. That's not it. Trying to pull back up your awesome guide.
You successfully unshared finally.
Okay. Oh. Okay. Okay, so yeah, since this takes like at least, I'm pretty sure Visual Studio, or not Visual Studio Code, I'm pretty sure WSL makes you restart.
Yeah.
Especially if you're in some cases you might have to turn on the Windows feature. And if you do that, I think it'll make you restart for it to take effect. Oh, that's really helpful that command line boot camp you shared too in there.
Oh yeah, that's another that's from Eric. Eric Fetplace, I think. He works at a library in California, I think. And I think they use Koha too.
I think so.
That's kind of some of the stuff that like the developers a lot of times assume like that you know a few commands on the command line that maybe just need to read this little presentation and you'll be all caught up.
Well, and this is very helpful because the problem I ran into last time is, yeah, everything was very Linux centric and, assumed commands you didn't have and things like that. And since I'm doing this on my work computer, I want to make sure I understand what I'm doing before I do it. So
Yeah. And if you run into any errors while you're installing this or trying to update it, you can email the mailing list, which I will put the link to the group in the chat. And as much information like what error, what command you did, that's really helpful too, because like there were some errors that we ran into last time, but we didn't document very well. And then when I tried to update something on the README, Jonathan was like, oh, I can't reproduce that, and so would not update the README. And I didn't have like enough information to show exactly what was happening. So that's also good because then we can update the documentation for other people in the future. Oh, and it looks like we lost Rhonda, or Barbara and Rhonda. Okay. This snippet from David Cook that's linked in the documentation Brendan made is also really helpful. Just has some of the like, here's how to reindex, here's how to access the database if you need to like go in and manually change something in the database. Here's how to get grep. Here's how to like run tests and things like that. Here's how to do remote branches. So that comes up sometimes, especially with bigger projects like this data tables one that we were doing, where for one thing, the patches are probably pretty big. So attaching them to Bugzilla can be a lot, especially if they need to be changed. So instead they'll make a remote branch and link to it. I think. Do you know if the chat transcript gets saved, Andrew, for the 6? I know it does for the general, so it probably does, but we might need to ask whoever posts it to maybe send it to us. Because I don't know that that usually gets shared. Because I also lost some links. Yeah, I'll make a I'll put these in. The first one that I see right now, because I had to leave and come back, is the boot camp one. I know there's some other ones for like WSL, and I have the link to Brendan's thing here.
Just spammed you in Slack with all of the chat that I have, Lisette.
Oh, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So yes, I will send those to the group when the meeting's done. There we go. Okay. I'm trying to think of like what the best next step is, because it's going to take time for people to install their boxes and get them up. I guess, are there any questions that people have about the SIG or getting started with this?
I don't know if it's a question or a suggestion or what it is, but I'm coming into baby Koha development as baby software development. I don't have any grounding or background in the subject. So it'd be really useful. You've used a few jargony terms, which in context, I can figure out what rebase is. But if somewhere in that baby devs group, a glossary of terms to help get started, or some good resources like, okay, this is software development. This is how good resource for using Git or setting up a Git, environment, and just really it doesn't have to be full on tutorials, but or you Mattermost. Well, where would I find that? So there's a conversation going on there. Just some links to those resources to make sure that you have a place to get started would be really helpful.
Yeah.
Sort of relatedly, could there be some mechanism for people to say to ask for the terms that they would like defined and the subjects they would like some more information on? Because it's
so when
hard
you know, how do I know what you don't know? Yeah.
Right. And this definitely pushes us into that area of a lot of assumed knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that would be a good place for,
even just to have a conversation about what should we be documenting just to help people get started.
Yeah.
Like the conversation we just had about VS Code. Why would you want that? Well, this is why. I think Docker is probably another term that's familiar enough, but what is it really? that someone who's coming into this blind is just going to be, I don't know what that means. What's a
Yeah.
Docker?
Docker is the dark magic
Yes.
that it spins up the perfectly portable
Containerized
virtual
little, yes.
machine that we can all be in the same environment. That's kind of like in a nutshell.
Yeah.
And it spins up all the dependencies too.
And
So
yours is going to be just like his and the other one over there. And
Yep.
and it's gonna have like the like SQL server and the SIP server all
right.
already, so you don't have to go figure out how to install a SQL
Yeah.
server and then link it to your Koha server.
And this feels like most importantly for me, then when you've broken it all, you can throw your Docker away and start over.
And start fresh.
Yes.
Well, I think, and that kind of information in why it's important as part of the documentation for the baby development SIG, that someone who's brand new to this whole thing we don't go over the same thing every month, and they can kind of get up to speed
Yeah.
on being a developer.
Yeah, that's great. I will also actually, Andrew, are you an admin in the koha-US Google stuff? Because I don't have access to actually put anything in the Google Drive for baby devs yet.
Maybe. I mean, I don't fully understand all of my koha-US Google Drive access. But if you could
I
tell
can
me what
also
you're
email
trying to do, I
Christopher.
can see if I can do
He
it.
emailed me this morning about some stuff, so if that is easier.
I have
So
to run, but it
don't-
was nice to be involved, and I'd like to continue being in this group. I like it. Thank you.
Thanks, Brandon.
Hi.
Um, this is the special interest group Google Drive where we can put agendas and notes and things.
Thank you. I was just looking for that.
Yeah, it's linked on the special interest group's koha-US page. One of those join mailing list buttons should go to Baby Dev's Google group that I linked earlier. There was a problem earlier, but Crispy thinks he fixed it. So, one thing about some members of the Koha community, especially who have been around for a long time, is some of them have like so we're on Mattermost now, which is like a secure chat platform similar to like Slack, where you can have like multiple channels and stuff like that. Before, like a year ago or earlier this year, we were solely on IRC, which is like Internet Connection Relay, old school chat. And some people have in the Koha community have like IRC names that they also use frequently. Nick is Kid Clamp. Christopher Brannon is Crispy. I mean, I think his IRC name might have more, but he gets called Crispy a lot. I'm trying to think of who else. Martin from
The
PTFS
Koha
Europe.
Wiki has a cheat sheet of everybody's dumb secret IRC nicknames.
Yes.
Not that this was something that massively alienated me and frustrated me when I started working in the Koha arena.
Oh, you need to update yours because yours still says that you work at Dubuque.
Oh, yeah, I suppose.
Actually, yeah, I need to update mine too because I still have from when I worked at Velnet. So I'm like calling you out on that. And
Yeah, there
I need
exists
that.
some documentation. It's not great.
Yeah, that's the other thing is that not everyone who's on here is still very involved. Or maybe their name has changed, or
Well,
Well,
and really, Mattermost does tend to be a little bit more real name and actual email address, and
yeah. And even if you have your I think in Mattermost you can have like a display name but still have it show your real name if you hover. Okay. And anyone can sign up for a Koha Wiki account. To be able to like add that kind of information or make edits if they see something that needs to be updated. It takes a day or two because it has to be basically it gets vetted so that someone can't log in and bot mess it up. And sometimes you have to message Katrine in chat. She's the current release manager and the next release manager. Which I guess I could explain that also. We just voted on the release team for at the development SIG yesterday, or Koha development meeting yesterday. So many meetings. And every release cycle, which is twice a year. So for the 2505 release, which will be in May of 2025, we just voted on basically who's doing what. And actually, I bet I can see. Yes, okay. So the release manager is Katrine. She's the one who actually pushes things into main with Koha. So that's like after it's been tested and written and tested and QA'd. She's the one who says like she basically QAs it again often, we'll do more testing and let people know if it needs more work. And sometimes that's work that has to be done before it can be pushed, and sometimes it's like, okay, we need to file a bug for this other thing that's like out of the scope of this bug, but needs to be followed up on soon. Release maintain RM assistants are like they help out if Katrine is gone or if she just needs help getting through things. The release maintainers, because release manager and release maintainer, not confusing. The release maintainers are for the previous versions. So Paul's going to be the release maintainer for 2411 that just came out. So that's when things get backported in into the like 240506, I think is what things are getting pushed to right now for 2405. And so we do we do 4 back, I think? That's what it looks like on the, so we do 4 back. So like 2 years of previous updates. But kind of also the further back you go, the less likely things are actually going to be pushed back because it takes more work to backport things. Or if it's like new enhancements, don't get backported because it's an enhancement. Almost never get backported. I say that, but a couple times things have been. It like the 2211 and 2311 are probably mostly going to be security releases. 2405 is probably going to be like break-in stuff. Like any more CSRF bugs will probably get pushed back if we can. that's when, because we had a big CSRF, which is cross-site request forgery. CSRF, I think.
Close enough.
Close enough. And so like for security, we made a bunch of links use it. And that's one of those things that was like tested by a lot of people, but there are a lot of links in Koha. And also you might not think about how people use like links in reports or jQuery or something and not realize that those are going to break because that's not part of like the things to test. There can also be release maintainer assistants that can help out with like making sure that things are getting pushed back. You know, like if Jesse M is gone, Laura can do 2211 release maintenance stuff. Quality assurance team. So that is, well, one of the nice things, you can click on any of the links at the headers of these to see a little more about the project. Kind of like what they're expecting. So like the QA team, we like look at the signed off things, look at the code, test it, run the QA tests, which are included in Koha testing Docker. There's actually there's like a set of QA tools. And that just gets like a more thorough look, runs some automated tests that do things to make sure stuff isn't broken. Trying to pass things if they work, and if they don't, tell people why they're not working so that they can, you know, why there's a problem, which tests are failing, what are you seeing as a problem that would need to get fixed for you to pass it. Bug wranglers are always really helpful. I started doing that. A lot of that was like marking duplicate bugs. I would just go through like once a week. I'd just go look at all the new bugs for the last week. And if I recognized anything, I'd be like, I'm pretty sure there's a bug for that, and go see if I could find it. But that's also because people joke that I'm like a Bugzilla encyclopedia. They'll be like, this is a problem in Koha. And I'll be like, there's a bug for that, and go find it. Not everyone's brain works that way. But just trying to like close invalid bugs, do some testing, that kind of thing. Highlight things that are being worked on or need discussion, stuff like that. And then there's also like the documentation team, translation, all that kind of stuff. I don't feel like those change as much. Like Philip's been the documentation manager for a couple of cycles. David Nind and Caroline at least have been on the documentation team as long as I can remember me noticing who was on the documentation team. So yeah, we also have a couple wiki curators. They're looking at doing some cleanup, obsoleting old pages, hiding useless ones, that kind of thing. And doing some edits, because there's a lot of pages on Koha over the years, some of which are not super helpful anymore. So those are all some of the roles, and we just voted on that. But you will often see Kate, she's Katrine, but you'll often see her name as CAIT, especially in the Bugzilla, commenting on things. She's great. Everyone's great, really. People are really happy to answer questions. And actually, there is a development section of the wiki which is another thing that's like, there's a lot of things on here that are not necessarily super helpful, but this one has links to a lot of the things, like here are the coding guidelines. What are coding guidelines, you may ask? And that's standards that we have to say, you have to do things this specific way or not do things a specific way. A lot of them have QA tests. Like I'm actually working on a QA test right now for notice 1, which is new notices need to be made in template toolkit instead of the hungry alligators. Like that's the only thing I can, greater than less than symbols ones, the bespoke syntax. So I'm ready to test for that. That will, when QA happens, it'll say, hey, there's more hungry alligators than there were before. That's not okay. And like that's one of the things that the QA team or whoever's signing off should fail it when they're doing testing if it doesn't meet these guidelines. You do not have to know all the guidelines to test. That's the QA team. If you know that something is breaking a coding guideline and you're signing off on it, you can fail it. So, but also just things like, hey, how do you do a commit message? Which is, a commit message is what goes at the top of the patch when you apply it to, when you attach it to the bug. So, okay. Yes, that. Okay. So like this one, port overdue notice default to template toolkit. And if you look, oh yeah. So like this is what the commit message is. A lot of this gets automatically written by, okay, Andrew's got to run. And we'll wrap up in a couple minutes. But this automatically gets written by like stuff in Koha. Well, actually, these do. Get automatically written by part of the Koha testing Docker toolset. You write the subject, and so like we do it this way. You do the bug and then a colon, then a space. Bug, space, bug number, colon, space. Subject. This turns into a comment. So like if you go look at the bug, there's a comment here. Like, let's see, or did he do that? Yeah, so this is that same comment. It's linked to the attachment. And so there's like rules for all of that and how you write that. And that's also, they'll talk about like doing the test plan. And yeah, it should include enough detail that it could be followed by someone familiar with Koha who doesn't use whatever section of the code you're editing. So that means that like, if it's an acquisitions bug, they should really tell you how to set up acquisitions. Things like that. And not just start with make an order. You know, you have to have a budget and a fund and whatever other things. I don't know. Acquisitions is one of my weak spots. That's why I picked it. but then I don't have good examples for what might need to be set up. Things like that. The rest of this is automatically done by Git. And it's just saying like, these are things that were subtracted and things that were added. But you don't really need to know all of that. I just think it's nice to know at least sort of what it means. You can also look at diffs, which is a good way to kind of figure out how people are changing code. Because it'll show the old and the new. And so that can be helpful if you're then saying, for my first bug, I'm going to go do one of these notices into Template Toolkit because we have a whole bunch that we're trying to port over. You can go and look and see, here are all the things that someone did, because a lot of it's going to be the same. But that can be a good way to learn because you can see, oh, it's gonna crash again because I tried to stop screen sharing. Okay. But that can just be like a helpful way to kind of see what is actually happening. Especially on these smaller patches. With bigger patches, it can get really daunting. So, okay, I see that it, oh, Zoom's really crashing. Let's see. Zoom really doesn't like me today. It probably means I have an update to do. So I will get as much of that information sent out to the baby devs list, as well as I'm gonna talk to Christopher about getting the ability to edit the drive so that we can put in notes from today, as well as notes that we took last time at our less official one. But we do have some information there about like, hey, here's what some of these terms are. That I would have put in an agenda for today if I had had access to the Google group before. I didn't even have the link to the dev or the drive until this morning. So so that did not end up happening, but we should have that for next time. And that's something too that like, maybe I'll make one document that's like, here's a glossary of things to know. And if people have terms they come across that they want, that they think should be on there, they can just add it to the document at the, like at the bottom or whatever, and we can talk about them at our next meeting or make the change if we see it before that.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
Appreciate all the information. It's a
Yes.
lot
Oh,
to
yeah.
absorb.
It is a lot to
Mhm.
absorb. And that's one thing
Yeah.
is that like it takes a while to learn.
Yeah.
There's a lot
Thanks,
going
Lizette.
on. Yeah. And our next
Thanks
meeting
very
is
much.
gonna be the 12th of December.
Okay.
So
All right.
All right. See you then.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
bye.